After 20 years, he claimed he needed space and demanded a divorce. I signed without a word. Months later, as he celebrated his engagement to his assistant at our old vacation home, I arrived unannounced. "Congratulations," I said, handing him an envelope. His father's will had a clause, "Divorce me, lose everything." His fiancée's scream was priceless. "I need space." 3 simple words that shattered 20 years of marriage on a Tuesday evening at Il Fiorentino, our favorite restaurant. Not "I'm unhappy" or "we need to talk," but the coward's prelude to abandonment, delivered between the eggplant risotto and crème brûlée. Graham didn't even have the decency to meet my eyes when he said it. His attention fixed on the condensation sliding down his water glass, as if it were somehow more deserving of focus than the woman who had devoted 2 decades of her life to him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The real beginning was 3 weeks earlier, in a sterile exam room, with mint green walls and motivational posters about courage that suddenly felt like mockery. "Mrs. Whitmore, you have stage 2 breast cancer." Mira Langston's voice was gentle but firm, her eyes kind behind practical glasses. "The good news is we've caught it relatively early. With surgery and radiation, the prognosis is quite favorable. Before we begin, I want to thank you for stepping into Evelyn Hartley's journey from betrayal to empowerment. If stories of resilience and unexpected strength in the face of life's cruelest twists speak to you, consider subscribing. It's completely free and connects with others who understand that sometimes the perfect life is just an illusion. Now let's witness how 20 years of marriage can unravel in an instant, and how justice sometimes arrives in the most unexpected way. I remember nodding mechanically, asking all the right questions, scheduling follow-ups, going through the motions while feeling oddly detached from my own body. At 46, the word itself felt foreign in my mouth, like a bitter pill I couldn't quite swallow. The timing couldn't have been worse. Graham had just been promoted to senior partner at Whitmore & Blakely LLP. The new role came with longer hours, more pressure, higher expectation. I'd spent weeks assuring him I could handle everything at home, the social events, charity functions, dinner parties, all the invisible labor that had always cushioned his climb. And now this, an inconvenient illness that didn't fit into our carefully curated lives. I rehearsed breaking the news to him during the drive home, planning to approach it calmly, rationally, the way Graham liked difficult things to be handled. But when I arrived, our house was empty. A text message pinged. "Working late, don't wait up." The 3rd time that week. I placed my hand over my chest, feeling the hidden enemy growing within, and wondered when exactly my husband had begun slipping away. That night I sat alone in our kitchen, tracing the veins in the marble countertop we'd chosen together during our 10th anniversary renovation. When had our home become a showroom instead of a sanctuary? When had I become just another tasteful accessory in Graham's upward trajectory? Looking back, the signs had been there. The sudden wardrobe overhaul, the gym membership he actually used, the new cologne I didn't recognize. Our conversations shortened, his criticism sharpened, the way he checked his phone obsessively during our rare dinners, how he flinched when I touched him, but I'd been too busy preserving the illusion to acknowledge what was unraveling. "Evelyn, did you reschedule dinner with the Norway?" Graham asked the next morning, not looking up from his phone during our brief overlap at breakfast. "I thought we could talk about something important first," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Can it wait? I've got court in an hour. The Harper case is a disaster." I swallowed the news with my lukewarm coffee. Sure, it can wait, but it kept waiting. Days stretched into a week, then 2. Graham came home later each night, his excuses increasingly vague. I scheduled my first oncology appointment alone, telling myself I was strong, independent, not abandoned. In the quiet moments between maintaining appearances and researching treatment options, I began to see the truth that had been staring at me for months. I began to notice the gaps in our life together. The framed photos throughout our home captured smiles but not joy. The separate bedrooms we'd been occupying for months, his late work hours, my early mornings, had become permanent, not practical. Then came the credit card statement, with charges from jewelry stores I'd never stepped foot in, dinners at restaurants too intimate to be labeled client meeting, the late-night phone calls he took in the garage, voice lowered, the lipstick shade on his collar, a vibrant red I never had the confidence to wear. "I think we should have a special dinner this weekend," Graham said that Friday, his voice oddly formal. "There's something important we need to discuss." Hope flickered. Maybe my illness had made him realize what truly mattered. Maybe after everything, we could still salvage what we'd built. I spent hours preparing, choosing a dress that hid my recent weight loss, applying makeup to soften the hollows beneath my eyes. I even called Rachel, breaking my silence about the diagnosis. He's finally noticed something's wrong, I told her. Maybe, she said hesitantly. But Evelyn, have you considered that might not be what he wants to talk about? I dismissed her concern. 20 years of marriage had to count for something. Il Fiorentino was quiet that Tuesday evening, the soft lighting casting shadows that mimicked intimacy. Graham looked nervous, tugging at his collar, checking his watch. Something cold settled in my stomach when I realized he'd chosen a public place to deliver whatever was coming. I need space, Evelyn, he said, cutting me off just as I began to tell him about the cancer. This isn't working anymore. The words hung between us like shattered glass. 20 years isn't working, I asked quietly. I've changed, you've changed. We want different things now. His rehearsed speech rolled forward, full of sterile euphemisms and corporate platitudes. Clean break, healthier in the long run. Time to move forward. Is there someone else? The question slipped out before I could stop it. His hesitation was the answer. Lena, he admitted. My assistant. It just happened. Just as if 2 decades of loyalty could be erased by something that just happened. As if my cancer, still unspoken, was somehow less urgent than his newfound passion for a woman half my age. I want a divorce, he concluded, sliding a business card across the table. My lawyer will be in touch. I've already found an apartment. I stared at the card, at his perfectly manicured hands, at the expensive watch I'd given him for our 15th anniversary. Is that all? I asked, voice surprisingly steady. He looked startled, as if he'd expected tears, begging. A scene. Yes, he said cautiously. I suppose it is. I nodded once, placed my napkin beside my barely touched meal, and walked out of Il Fiorentino with my dignity intact, and my heart in ruins. The cancer would have to wait. I had a divorce to survive first. The manila envelope arrived exactly 7 days later. Graham's lawyer, not even someone from Whitmore and Blakely, but a divorce specialist in a downtown glass tower, had wasted no time. I placed the envelope on the kitchen counter, and stared at it for hours before finally breaking the seal. Inside lay the cold, clinical dissection of 2 decades. The house to be sold, proceeds split, retirement accounts divided with sterile precision, personal property itemized like a shipment manifest. Graham had even listed the anniversary pearls he gave me 5 years ago, assigning them a monetary value as if they were just another asset to be distributed. The final page required only my signature, one signature to dissolve 20 years of vows, moments, sacrifices. I should have called my own lawyer. I should have fought, but something inside me had shifted. Absolutely, here is the continued rewritten version with the updated character and place names, keeping the narrative flow, tone and structure aligned with the previous passage. Let's pick up right where we left off. Let's pick up right where we left off. Montri Binson. At night at Il Fiorentino, a quiet calculus had begun to form beneath my grief. Are you sure about this, Evie? Rachel's voice crackled through the phone line. He doesn't deserve an easy way out. You should take him for everything he's worth. I need to focus on my health right now, I replied, not mentioning that I still hadn't told Graham about my diagnosis. Fighting him would only drain energy I didn't have. What I didn't tell Rachel was that my surrender wasn't it was strategy. Every instinct told me to wait, to watch, to let Graham believe he'd won. I signed the papers with steady hands, wrote a brief note, declining mediation or further discussion, and dropped the envelope at the courier's desk that same afternoon. Then I made 2 calls, one to Dr. Langston, to schedule surgery, the other to Harrison Whitmore Sr., my father-in-law. Harrison had always been more of a parent to me than my own father. After my mother died during college, it was Harrison who stepped in with quiet guidance and a steady presence that never demanded attention but was always there. When Graham and I married, he embraced me fully as his daughter, even as Graham grew more distant, more absorbed in his ambition. Through all the changes, my Thursday lunches with Harrison remained a constant. I was wondering when you'd call, he said as soon as he answered. His voice, still strong at 82, carried the weight of disappointment. Graham told me yesterday. Did he tell you why? Then, settling into the porch swing, I asked the question knowing the answer. He gave me some nonsense about growing apart, Harrison said, but I've seen how he looks at that girl from his office. We sat in companionable silence, bound by the quiet ache of loving someone who turned out to be less than we hoped. I'd still like to have our lunch on Thursday, I said. If that's okay with you. Nothing would make me happier, Evelyn. Nothing at all. 2 days later, I sat across from him at Brookstone Cafe, watching as he methodically buttered his toast. He looked older. The lines around his eyes were deeper, his shoulders more stooped. Graham gets his ruthlessness from his mother, Harrison said suddenly, setting down his knife. I always hoped your gentleness would soften those edges. I think I enabled them instead, I admitted quietly. He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. There's something I need to tell you, Evelyn, something important. He explained that after his wife died 6 years ago, he'd made significant changes to his will. Graham, as his only child, was set to inherit everything: the family firm, the Whispering Pines estate in Vermont, and a considerable financial portfolio. But I added a condition, he said, locking eyes with me. A moral clause, my lawyer called it. I listened, stunned, as Harrison laid it out. If Graham divorced me without proof of infidelity, if I didn't initiate the divorce, or if there wasn't documented misconduct on my part, he would forfeit everything. The estate, the cottage, the firm shares, all of it. Why would you do that? I whispered, because I watched how he treated you, even back then, how he took your devotion for granted, he said, voice tightening with emotion, and because I've seen too many men my age discard their wives once they think no one's watching. You've given him everything, and he gave you space. I sat back, the full weight of it washing over me. Does Graham know? He never bothered to read the will, Harrison said, a sad smile flickering across his face. Too busy climbing ladders to care about old men and their paperwork. That lunch changed everything. Walking home, I felt something bloom inside me, not hope, exactly, but possibility. For the first time, I saw Graham's hasty divorce for what it was: a miscalculation, a move made with arrogance and ignorance. And I held the quiet ace he never saw coming. In the weeks that followed, clarity arrived like sunlight after a storm. As I recovered from my lumpectomy, a procedure Graham still knew nothing about, I reconnected with friends I had long neglected. I reached out to a financial advisor and began restructuring my future on terms of my own design. I began radiation treatments with Rachel by my side, discovering reserves of strength I never knew I possessed. Then came the Instagram post, the one that ripped open wounds barely beginning to scar. Lena, Graham's new assistant, had tagged him at Maison Lardiste, an exclusive Manhattan restaurant, known for its romantic ambiance. The caption read, "She said yes." It floated above an image of Lena's manicured hand, now adorned with a diamond ring that looked suspiciously like the one from my grandmother's jewelry box. The same heirloom Graham had once dismissed as outdated and too antique for modern taste. The comment section overflowed with heart emojis and congratulations, many from couples who had dined at our table, toasted in our garden, celebrated milestones with us. The engagement had come just weeks after our divorce was finalized. The speed of it was not just insulting, it was revealing. That night, I scrolled through Lena's public profile, piecing together the real timeline of their relationship: office party selfies, where she stood too close; team dinners where Graham's partners were conspicuously absent; matching Halloween costumes; subtle details I'd missed, or refused to see. Their affair had clearly begun long before Graham ever asked for space. I was about to close the app when a single photo made my blood run cold. There it was, Whispering Pines Estate, nestled beside the lake in Vermont. The caption read, "Planning our perfect engagement party, fresh start, justice, whispering memories." The very place Graham had proposed to me 21 years ago. The same property that, according to Harrison's will, would never be his if he divorced me without proof of infidelity. I lowered the phone and walked to the window, watching darkness settle over the street I'd lived on for half my life. The quiet strength I'd been nurturing over the past weeks, now crystallized into something sharper: purpose. Graham thought he'd walked away with his freedom and future secure. He had no idea his father had foreseen this very scenario, and he certainly didn't realize that I now held the power to unravel his carefully curated new life. I picked up my phone and opened my calendar. The engagement party was in 3 weeks, just enough time to plan my appearance at Whispering Pines, and deliver the truth that would shatter his illusion, just as he had shattered mine. 3 weeks wasn't much time to prepare for the confrontation that would change everything. My radiation treatments left me exhausted, but each session felt like a step toward reclaiming my body, not just from cancer but from the shadow of the woman I used to be. The technicians became unexpected confidants. 3 more to go, Mrs. Whitmore. One of them beamed, as if counting down not just to the end of treatment, but to my reinvention. You don't have to keep using his name, you know, Rachel pointed out one afternoon as she drove me home. You were Evelyn Hartley for 30 years before you ever became Evelyn Whitman. The thought struck me like a bell. I'd been so focused on what Graham had taken from me, I'd forgotten what I could reclaim. Hartley, I said softly, testing the sound of it. Evelyn Hartley. The next morning I visited the courthouse and filled out the paperwork to restore my former name. The clerk, an older woman with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense expression, looked at the form over her glasses. Divorce? She asked. Recently, I admit. She nodded, stamping the page with unnecessary force. I processed mine 30 years ago. Best decision I ever made. She handed the papers back with a conspirator's smile. Welcome back to yourself, Miss Hartley. That small act of reclamation sparked other. I called my old law firm, the one I'd left behind when Graham's career pulled us across state lines, and arranged coffee with my former mentor, Cassandra Ellison. At 75, Cassandra had cracked more glass ceilings than most knew existed, and she had no plans of retiring. So he left you for his secretary, she said, raising one sculpted brow. How breathtakingly original. Her dry wit, so familiar, was oddly comforting. And what's your plan now, Evie? She asked. Besides making him regret the day he met you. I hesitated, then told her everything: the cancer, Harrison's will, the moral clause, the engagement party at Whispering Pines. She listened without interruption, her sharp eyes narrowing the more I spoke. You need documentation, she said at last. The clause is powerful, but only if you can prove it exists. And that Harrison was of sound mind when he added it. He gave me a copy, I said, but I haven't told Graham about it yet. And you won't, Cassandra said firmly, pulling out her phone. Not until the moment of maximum impact. She made a quick call, then smiled at me. My estate law colleague will meet us at my office in 20 minutes. We're going to make sure this is airtight. As my circle of allies grew, so did my strength. After my final radiation treatment, Dr. Langston declared my prognosis excellent. My financial advisor helped me secure a modest apartment and a solid investment strategy, something that belonged to me and no one else. Even my neighbor, Douglas Reed, a quiet widower who had always been more Graham's friend than mine, showed up unexpectedly with homemade soup and something more valuable: honesty. I overheard Graham at the club last week, he said, eyes fixed on his coffee cup. He was telling everyone you'd had emotional problems for years, that he finally had to end things for his own well-being. He looked up, his expression troubled. I know that's not true, and if you need someone to speak up, I will. Whatever you need. The revision of our history didn't surprise me. Graham had always controlled the narrative, but the casual cruelty of it stung. He wasn't satisfied with leaving. He needed to destroy the foundation too, so he could pretend it had never been solid to begin with. Thank you, Douglas, I said, genuinely touched. Just knowing you saw through it, that means more than you know. With 2 weeks until the engagement party, I turned fully toward the plan. Cassandra arranged for a court-certified copy of Harrison's will, complete with notarized authentication and a letter from his estate attorney affirming the clause's legal integrity. Rachel helped me choose my armor, a slate blue dress that complemented the streaks of silver I'd stopped coloring during treatment. As I stood in front of her mirror studying the woman I was becoming, she crossed her arms and smiled. You look powerful, she said, like someone who knows exactly what she's doing. And for the first time I truly felt that way too. But the hardest part wasn't legal or logistical. It was emotional. Each night I rehearsed the confrontation, visualized Graham's stunned expression, Lena's disbelief, the moment I would calmly hand over the envelope that would unravel the fantasy they'd built on the bones of my life. I practiced my words. Not angry, not bitter, just cold clarity. A business transaction, nothing more. Then 1 week before the party, the final piece fell into place. Harrison called me, his voice tinged with urgency. Graham just called. Invited me to the engagement party. Are you going? I asked, surprised. Oh, I absolutely want to be there, he chuckled. But not until after you deliver the news. I told him I wasn't feeling well enough to travel. Then, in a quieter voice, I've instructed my lawyer to send the official inheritance notification to Whispering Pines the morning after the party. Timing is everything. The day before I was set to leave for Vermont, I received an unintentional preview of the spectacle ahead. Lena had posted photos of Whispering Pines' interior, now stripped of every antique, every photograph, every hint of the Whitmore family legacy I had carefully curated over 2 decades. In their place were glossy, soulless furnishings, monochrome furniture, hotel artwork. The caption read, "Creating our dream space." New beginnings. That cottage had been my sanctuary, the place I went when Graham buried himself in work. I'd spent countless weekends there, befriending local shopkeepers, tending to the heirloom garden planted by Harrison's mother, journaling by the lake, and now it had become the stage for their rewritten story with no trace of what came before. As I zipped up my overnight bag and tucked the sealed envelope inside my purse, I realized something unexpected. I no longer felt like a victim searching for justice. This wasn't revenge, it was consequence. Graham had discarded me, our vows, our years, our life without hesitation. But he'd forgotten one thing: some promises have a cost. I checked my flight confirmation one last time and closed my laptop. Tomorrow the reckoning would begin. "Hello, Graham," I replied, my tone light and conversational. "Lena, congratulations on your engagement." A hush fell over the garden. The string quartet faltered for a beat before regaining their rhythm. Nearby conversations paused as heads turned, curious then hushed by recognition and unease. Graham's face tightened, his practiced charm slipping as he attempted to read my expression. "This is unexpected," he said again, almost robotically. He stepped slightly forward, angling his body in an attempt to guide me away from the crowd. "Perhaps we could speak privately." "Oh, I won't be long," I assured him, taking the final steps that closed the space between us. "I just wanted to deliver this in person." I reached into my purse and produced the envelope, cream cardstock, wax sealed and notably weighty. Graham hesitated. He didn't reach for. His eyes darted from the envelope to the guests around us, scanning for witnesses, for cameras, for any chance to diffuse the attention now shifting fully in our direction. Lena stepped forward instead, eyes sharp, smile frozen. "What is it?" she asked, her voice higher than usual. "Just a copy of something Graham should have read a long time ago," I said evenly, holding it up slightly. "His father's will specifically, the moral clause regarding divorce." Graham's color drained. "What are you talking about?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I broke the wax seal and carefully removed the notarized document, unfolding it for them both, and anyone else now leaning subtly closer to listen. "Harrison added this 6 years ago," I said, my voice steady, clear, deliberate. "It states that if Graham initiates divorce proceedings against me without proof of infidelity, he forfeits his entire inheritance." Lena snatched the document from my hands, scanning it with trembling fingers. Her lips moved silently as she read, then twisted. "This can't be legal," she hissed. "Tell me this isn't legal." But Graham said nothing. He stared at the paper, then at me, and then at the crowd now watching with rapt attention. "My father would never do this to me," he finally muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "He did it because he saw you clearly," I replied. "Even before I did." Behind us, Diane Harris gasped again. The ripple of murmurs turned into a quiet storm of whispered questions and widened eyes. One of Graham's senior partners, Richard Westlake, if I remembered correctly, stepped closer, brows furrowed. "Graham, is this true? Your father's shares, the cottage, the estate, everything," I confirmed before Graham could answer. "The shares in the house we're standing on, all of it reverts to Harrison's charitable trust, unless Graham can prove I was unfaithful." Lena's hands clenched around the document, now creased and shaking. "You planned this," she accused. "You manipulated an old man to destroy us." I smiled, calm and measured. "No, Lena. Harrison made that decision years before you entered the picture. I didn't manipulate anyone. I simply showed up." The silence that followed was a vacuum, every guest hanging on the edge of scandal and disbelief. "And just so you're aware," I added, "the official notification from Harrison's attorney will be arriving tomorrow morning." I thought you both deserved a personal preview. I retrieved the now crumpled copy from Lena's hand, smoothed it and tucked it back into the envelope. "Enjoy the party," I said, and turned to leave. Behind me I heard the cracks forming, Lena's voice rising into a furious shriek, Graham's attempt to calm her, the sharp voices of his colleagues questioning, pulling away. One woman dropped her glass. The string quartet stopped playing entirely. I didn't look back. As I walked up the gravel path toward my car, the late afternoon sun caught on the surface of the lake, throwing golden light across the water. The weight I had carried for so long, guilt, betrayal, grief, lifted with each step. This wasn't triumph. It was truth. And truth always leaves a mark. By the time I reached the car, the celebration behind me had begun to unravel, but I was already gone, no longer part of the story Graham was trying to tell. I slid into the driver's seat, closed the door and exhaled deeply. Let the reckoning begin. Not triumph, not vengeance, just the hollow ache of watching someone you once loved unravel under the weight of his own hubris. I reached my car as Lena's voice rose again behind me, shrill and panicked, hurling accusations. I heard Graham stumbling over excuses, attempting damage control, but the tone had shifted. The crowd wasn't curious anymore, they were judgmental, calculating, siding with the future they wanted to stay attached to, which clearly wasn't him. I slid into the driver's seat and closed the door, sealing myself off from the cacophony behind me. For a long moment I simply sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, the envelope beside me on the passenger seat. This was the final chapter of a story I hadn't asked to be part of, and yet I had rewritten the ending, quietly, precisely, without shouting or spectacle. Outside, the manicured chaos of the engagement party began to dissolve, like fog burning off in the morning sun. The guests now had something far more interesting to gossip about than canapés and floral centerpieces. And I had something even more valuable than closure: freedom. I turned the key in the ignition, gravel crunching beneath the tires as I eased the car back down the long drive. As I passed the lanterns still swaying in the breeze, I glanced once more into the rearview mirror. Graham stood alone now. Lena had disappeared, perhaps inside, perhaps into the mess she'd just inherited. He was rubbing his forehead, the same way he used to when trying to craft a narrative that might still make him look like the victim. But there was no saving face now, not in front of his colleagues, not in front of the community, and certainly not in front of me. The road curved away from Whispering Pines and I didn't look back again. That evening at the quiet inn overlooking the lake, I ordered dinner to my room and sat by the window with a glass of wine. The water shimmered beneath the fading light and the air held that crisp Vermont stillness I had once thought belonged only to the past. My phone buzzed, a flurry of texts, missed calls, voicemails. Rachel, Douglas, even Cassandra, who had apparently already caught wind of the afternoon's unraveling. But I silenced them all. Tonight wasn't for conversation, tonight was for peace. I stretched my legs out in the window seat and let my thoughts drift, not to Graham or Lena or legal clauses, but to something simpler: the sound of my own breath steady and calm, the taste of warm buttered bread, the quiet knowledge that I had walked through fire and emerged not just intact, but transformed. And as the stars began to freckle the lake's reflection, I whispered the truth aloud for the first time, just to myself. I'm free. What did you want to discuss? I asked, folding my hands calmly on the table between us. Graham exhaled, long and slow, as if deflating in front of me. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw tight with tension, and his once perfectly tailored suit jacket was wrinkled and hanging unevenly off his shoulders. Lena left. He stared into his untouched coffee. The firm has asked me to take a leave of absence while they assess the situation. Dad isn't returning my calls. I waited. And? I prompted after a pause. His gaze met mine, tired, unfocused, desperate. You've destroyed everything. No, I said quietly but firmly. You did that all on your own. The waitress approached but quickly retreated after sensing the atmosphere at our table. A stillness hung between us, thick with things unsaid. Why didn't you tell me about the clause? Graham asked, leaning forward. His voice was lower now, edged with frustration. All those the divorce, the silence. You knew, and you just waited. Would it have changed anything? I asked. His silence was answer enough. I didn't orchestrate this to hurt you, I continued. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own choices. His jaw clenched. And now you get the satisfaction of watching me lose everything. I shook my head. I didn't gain anything from this, Graham. The estate goes to charity, not to me. I studied him carefully, the man I had once built a life with, the man who had asked for space without realizing I had already given it to him, long before the words were ever spoken aloud. But I did gain something else, I said. I gained clarity. I gained my name back. I gained the strength to finally stop sacrificing myself at the altar of your ambition. His lips parted as if to respond, but no words came, which is when I said the one thing I hadn't told him yet. I have cancer. He went pale. What? Stage 2 breast cancer, I replied. I was diagnosed 3 weeks before you asked for the divorce. I tried to tell you that night at Il Fiorentino, but you were too busy listing the ways I no longer fit into your future. He looked like I'd slapped him. Evelyn, I didn't know. Jesus, I had no idea. I know you didn't, I said gently, because you weren't paying attention. You hadn't been for a long time. I took a deep breath and leaned back. I'm in remission now. My prognosis is good, better than yours, frankly. That last sentence came out before I could stop it, but to my surprise, Graham gave a small humorless laugh. Yeah, that sounds about right. We sat in silence again, the kind that didn't beg to be filled. I don't expect forgiveness, he said finally. I don't know. I needed you to know that I never meant for it to go this far. I gave a small nod, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. I believe you, I said. But meaning something and doing something are rarely the same. He rubbed his face with both hands. So what now? I stood, gathering my purse. Now? I go home. I keep living. I rebuild. You do whatever you need to do. He didn't try to stop me, didn't ask for another moment. He just sat there staring into the remnants of a life he thought he controlled. And as I stepped out into the cool evening air, I realized that the final thread had been cut. Not with fury, not with revenge, but with truth. And that was enough. The photo albums beside me, a quiet archive of a life both lived and left behind. Each mile I put between myself and whispering pines felt like a shedding of roles, of burdens, of the version of myself who once tried so desperately to hold everything together. Back in Boston, the city greeted me not with the weight of old memories, but with the openness of new beginnings. I placed the box of photo albums on the shelf of my modest apartment, beside the velvet box of earrings now back in my care, fragments of a past I no longer clung to, but didn't need to erase either. The job at Cassandra's firm proved more than just a fresh start. It became a calling, managing nonprofit clients, organizing campaigns, connecting donors with missions that mattered. It was a life of purpose built from all the invisible labor I had once given freely to Graham's career, now finally credited and paid forward into something real. I no longer introduced myself as Evelyn Whitmore, just Evelyn Hartley, and that was enough. One crisp afternoon, I stood at the edge of a community garden I helped fund through one of our firm's newer clients. Rows of budding herbs and flowers lined the soil, echoing the quiet beauty of the heirloom garden I'd once tended in Vermont. I knelt and opened the crate of antique tools from Harrison, their worn wooden handles fitting into my hands like familiar old friends. A little girl nearby watched me from behind her mother's legs. "Are you planting something special?" she asked. I smiled, brushing dirt from my palms. "I am," I said. "Something that takes time to grow, but it's worth the wait." Later, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the air shifted with the smell of earth and possibility, I sat on a nearby bench with a mug of tea and a quiet heart. So much had changed, so much had been lost, but in that loss, something had been found too. Not revenge, not redemption, but resilience. A new season had begun, not marked by drama or destruction, but by rebirth. And for the first time in years I wasn't waiting for the next crisis or the next disappointment. I was simply living, fully, freely, and finally as myself, Evelyn Hartley. And that was the real victory all along.